signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Yes, it is Friday, February 3rd, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. Welcoming back to the show, Amy Knecht, everybody. Yes, we are here to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics, and the long promised, the long discussed, we're going to be getting into, Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, the streaming shows that we know and love. Yes, indeed. Yes, all that today on today's Friday Politics Roundup. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And look, it's school board election season, everybody. Do not let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted pact to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small-dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation to ragingchicken.levelfield.net. That's ragingchicken.levelfield.net. On this week's show, we'll go a little light on the overall news so we can get into the fun stuff. But Republicans moved to remove Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Rashida Tlaib brought the fire to the House floor during the debate before the vote. And we should remember, just so that we don't repeat mistakes of the past, that the Democratic Party leadership helped lay the groundwork for the attacks on Ilhan Omar. If you all recall, basically, in the first days after she was sworn into office, right, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic Party leadership, decided that instead of pushing their number one priority bill and messaging on that, they thought it would be a better idea to censure and attack Ilhan Omar for perceived and anti-Israeli comments. Right? Here you go. Repeated once again in these debates on the floor. Here. This time, however, Democrats stood together and it was on party line vote, but damage had been done. And if you question me about that, go read any of the reporting about what had happened. All of them mentioned Nancy Pelosi's attacks on Ilhan Omar in her first week. So go check it out. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made moves to turn back the clock on higher education. On Tuesday, he announced a, quote, proposed overhaul of the state's higher education system that would eliminate what he calls ideological conformity. Yes, his plan would mandate courses in Western civilization, eliminate diversity and equity programs, and gut the protections of tenure for faculty. What could go wrong with that? And keeping in step, to mark the beginning of Black History Month, the College Board caved to right-wing attacks against their AP curriculum for African American Studies, striking many notable Black writers from their curriculum. Yes, suck right up to that DeSantis machine, folks. Crazy. But we're going to spend a chunk of time getting some updates, what's happening over in the Palisades School District, right? Yes, the school board, once again, making moves. We're going to see some of the bleeding of the insanity and craziness starting to leak into the Palisades School District, as we're seeing happening over there in Souderton, too, as well. Amy Knecht is here, of course, to bring us all the details. And then what you've all been waiting for, I'm sure, right? We're going to talk about House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power. Of course, those two blockbuster streaming series. House of the Dragon, of course, is the prequel to the Game of Thrones, and the Rings of Power is the prequel to Lord of the Rings. House of the Dragon streaming on HBO and Rings of Power streaming on Amazon. And maybe we'll even speculate about when the hell we're going to get to see the Wheel of Time season 2 come out. So been waiting on that one too as well. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern, his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcast. Head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And the big news of the week, the Bucks County Beacon released its first episode of The Signal. Its brand new podcast produced by yours truly. Yes, that's right. The new launch of episode 1 of The Signal, brought to you by, it's a basic interview program. You've got the editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon, Cyril Nicolaico. I was going to bring on folks, have interviews a couple times a month. First interview is with Sue Ann DeVito, talking about kind of, basically protection of immigrant rights and some of the work that she's been doing in this kind of radical listening as part of going to the border to find out what's actually happening on. So check out The Signal. Head on over to the Bucks County Beacon to get info on that. It's streaming live on Podbean. It will soon be wherever your podcast gets caught, right? So it'll be on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and so on. This always happens. You launch a new podcast. You got to have the episodes up for a bit before they get kind of, networked out. But that will happen very soon. More details on that to come. Very excited to be part of this project. And for all your gamers out there, the Game-In, that's with 2 N's. Game-In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops, and kids get a discount when they get A's in their report card. Can't beat that. Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at the Game-In with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongAdayMan with 2 N's, at SongAdayMan on Twitter. And coming up on Out to Coop Live, we've got some good ones here. On Monday, this coming Monday, we've got Hannah Leffingwell will be joining this show. Hannah's got a recent piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education called The Academic Career is Broken and the Need for Fundamental Change in Higher Ed. She also had a great piece in the Jacobin about almost a year before this one. Basically said, I love higher education, but it isn't loving me back. Very much along the same kind of issues here. Please join us for that conversation. Monday, that is the 6th, this coming Monday at 7 p.m. And then the following Monday, February 13th, Alyssa Bowen's coming back to the show, and she'll be talking about her recent piece in Truth Out called The Right Has Expanded Its Dark Money Strategy for Dominating School Boards and the Deep Pockets Behind It All. Alyssa will be joining us again. That'll be February 13th at 7 p.m. right here on Out to Coop Live. Look, everybody, we want progressive future. We need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. We're here for the fight, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement, and the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. So, Amy, welcome back to the show.
Hello, it's good to be back.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's the first time that you've been on in the new year. It kind of feels like the launch of like a new era now.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think every January for the past couple of years it felt like that. So
that's a good point. That's good. I think, I don't know about you, but 2022, I was very happy that it was in the rearview mirror when it was done. It was just I found it to be an incredibly hard year at just like a personal level, political level, like things going on in the world level. It was just tough.
Yeah, it was. I'm definitely glad to be starting out fresh with the new year. So a lot of good things in the works. So that's always awesome.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, like I was saying at the top of the show, we'll kind of talk a little bit about something that happened in the politics today, but I'm really interested in kind of digging into what's happening over in Palisades and then get into our discussion of the fun stuff, right? The good parts of 2022, I guess we could call that. But the big news this week coming right out, I thought was, that we saw what this new House of Representatives leadership is going to look like. That coming right out of the gate, basically going after women of color, going after kind of retribution, and playing the kind of like, well, you did it, so we're going to do it kind of game.
The tit for tat.
Yeah, and pretending as if they're the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Pretending that it's the same thing when Ilhan Omar is critical of Israel, right? For its basic, I don't know, occupation and suppression of the Palestinian people for generations. I don't know. And it's, systematic bombing and kind of removal of rights. It's basically an apartheid regime that it's got with the Palestinians. That is the same thing as like Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of like assisting in the insurrection on January 5th. That these
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing, right? So that, that's all they're doing, which is just crazy. But I don't know. Did you happen to catch any of AOC's and Rashida Tlaib's and Ilhan Omar's speeches there?
I unfortunately did not. The past, couple of weeks have been really busy, especially with, in the world of politics, there's been a lot of changing of hands of things going on.
Yeah.
I have not managed to catch any of the hearings or anything that's been happening, save for what I see on Twitter when I check my feed, but like other than that, I haven't seen that. I did not know that they were being removed from their committees. I do know that the House Republicans are like really pushing through a circus style of court at the moment, because what they're focusing on is just completely ridiculous. It's not what we should be focusing on as a country at the moment. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that I happen to, I didn't watch the live discussion of it, right? I saw the clips come out afterwards and some of the reporting on it, but it's worth for everybody. If anybody has not seen that stuff yet, do take some time to check it out, because I think that what we see coming from the squad right now, they're like laying down the gauntlet, right? They're basically saying this is, calling it out. This is a direct attack against women of color. This is and kind of laying out exactly what they're doing, exposing those moves. And AOC is the first time I've ever seen her that angry in a speech on the floor, by concluding with basically said, when my life was threatened and someone threatened to kill me, I didn't get even so much as an apology. And she had her notebook, she slammed it down. And I was like, whoa.
Nice.
Yeah. So, if anything, that's an awesome move. I was also very happy to see that there was a good piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer. I think it just came out either this morning or yesterday on Summer Lee. Because of course Summer Lee's kind of she got delayed in being able to take her office because of all the games happening here or happening in DC. But it was pretty amazing seeing this article on her, and her perspective on it is like, look, I'm here to do some really hard things, and it's going, and I carry that particular weight. And so she didn't, she said I didn't feel like celebrating because I'm here to do some hard stuff, which is, I mean, I don't know what else you could want. I mean, Summer Lee, I think is going, I just hope, I can't imagine she's not, but I just hope that she gets connected to the folks in the squad pretty quickly, so that she's not there alone, because she's pretty much done it, not entirely alone here in Pennsylvania. I mean, you had Elizabeth Fiedler, you had Sarah Innamorato, you had some, good folks around her, but in DC, it could be a different animal. It's good to have some other kind of really powerful women of color there for her to be joining.
Oh yeah. And I could see her, I don't know, just, being involved with them too. So I think it's important. I definitely think it's important. I think it's important that they stated exactly, out front, like what it was too, right? Because this whole like circumventing and, kind of like beating around the bush when talking about these matters, in Congress is just ridiculous, because you get the other side and they're like, oh my God, they like pretend to be shocked.
Right.
It's ridiculous, so, and everybody knows that they have targeted the squad since day one.
Yep. 100%. 100%. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. That's for sure, what the consequences are going to be. I've actually been kind of checked out a bit from the the internal DC machinations, because I hate to put it like this, but the news coverage of like speculation about the moves of what's happening behind the scenes of all this stuff, I could really care less right now about this, because it's like, we know what's happening, right? To pretend that there's any kind of like goodwill or actually stuff happening behind the scenes is just ridiculous. So whatever. I mean, once they get settled out and we start getting some real things kind of going on, I think it's going to be some fireworks. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like I said, the only, thing that I've been seeing lately is, from people like, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and all the ridiculousness that they're, trying to push through. I mean, and to me, it's a waste of time because
Yep.
it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. It's going to die. It's just they're making these like grand gestures at the moment of like, oh, look what we're getting done, but nothing's getting done.
Right. It's all performative stuff for
Yep.
the next presidential election. I think that's all they care about. So.
Exactly.
So the bigger news, the big stuff that I've been following a little bit more closely has to do with what Ron DeSantis has been doing down in Florida.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's been, and I talked about this on the show on Out the Coop Live on Monday, kind of a bit about what some of the moves are down there. But to see now that you have, him giving this big speech, I didn't realize he was giving this big speech on Tuesday. That was right after Out to Coop Live when I was talking about this stuff. But he basically comes out and just, again, throws down the gauntlet, basically says, we're coming after higher education. We're going to turn back the clock and everything is going to be like Hillsdale College, right? Where it's going to be Western civilization, great books. Let's learn about the white folks. Let's learn about those great institutions. America's great. We're going to get rid of all diversity and equity programs, right? And we're going to kind of basically eliminate tenure for faculty, right? In any kind of practical way. And all you basically, there you go. There's your three pillars there's going after in higher education. And again, there's direct consequences in Florida right now because they're actually like legitimately doing this stuff, right? They're eliminating kind of DEI initiatives that are happening at the K through 12 level. Now they're going after what's happening in higher education. And that is going to have the direct impacts on all those kids and all the teachers and all the communities throughout Florida. And on top of that, he's basically laying out, here's the platform he's going to be running on in 2024 when it comes to the presidential stuff. I thought that was just, that's been, from my perspective, has been horrifying.
It has been. It's been ridiculous. It's been absolutely. I mean, when they made the announcement that he was like banning an AP history class on African American studies because it was like, what did he call it? Like a waste of time? I was just like, what? It's ridiculous.
Yep.
And then I just don't see. I don't know where he gets that authority that he feels that he has is to like mandate what everybody can learn about. Like I'm so irritated with somebody like Ron DeSantis, and clearly all of this he's making political moves because if he doesn't throw his hat in for the next presidential election, I would be greatly shocked. You know what I mean? I just it's terrible. Did you see the article though? He's being sued. Yep, he's being sued by three high school kids, by three high school students about over the AP courses, stating that he's basically like infringing their rights. So it's not. Oh man, and I see this happening. So there's a lot of parallels between Florida and Pennsylvania, unfortunately. Like, and you always see stuff like that. So if you can only imagine, like, if Doug Mastriano had won the governorship, we would be looking at a lot of the same practices. You know what I mean, being mirrored here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The connection between there is a direct historical connection between the educational kind of infrastructure in Pennsylvania and that in Florida. I mean, it's really remarkable. I mean, I didn't realize how close, for example, like Tom Ridge had been to some of the folks on the education. So it goes back like that far, like when Tom Ridge was governor.
It's not just of recent.
No, right. And I remember first noticing this when we had this series of chancellors that came in for the Pennsylvania State Higher Education. They were all from Florida, right? And it was just like one after the other, right? So it was like there was like this internal Pennsylvania thing for a long time where a lot of the chancellors had kind of gone up through the ranks, right? Mm-hmm. And there had been, more or less a kind of, yes, and a little bit of adversarial tension stuff, but everyone was kind of on board with, providing kind of affordable, high quality education to working class Pennsylvanians, disagreed over things. So there'd be arguments and back and forth, but then they would kind of, come to agreements. That had been the MO. When I came in, shortly after I came in, they hired Judy Hample, who just came in with, with the new model. Right, we're anti-union. We're taking control of this. We faculty mean nothing. All that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so she came in. She was horrible. And then the next guy, was it Kavanaugh who came next? Was also from Florida, right? And then you had Frank Brogan, right, who also came from Florida. So you had this and they got progressively worse. And I remember talking to I had called down to some of some folks that are in the leadership of the faculty union down there when Frank Brogan was becoming chancellor, the guy before the one who's there now, just to kind of get a lay of the land, right? I said, I know what I read, but can you give me a sense of the experience? And it was horrifying, right? And do it ahead of time.
Yeah.
But he also kind of laid out some of that structure, how that educational structure worked on there. And it really is seen as, the wedge issue to launch political careers. And they see it as an exportable model. And that's essentially what they've done in Pennsylvania. And I think what the move by the College Board to basically say, we are going to, it's been really interesting to read that too, because we're going to revise our AP exam. We're going to revise our AP curriculum. We're going to get rid of some of these authors, these controversial authors. And they claim that, it had nothing to do with the Florida decision, that they were already in the works ahead of time. But what they don't say is that this is responding to this pressure. Right. Yeah. So even if it wasn't specifically because of the move that Florida made this week, it has everything to do with this kind of like anti-wokeness, right? That's coming out of the right wing that's dominating Republican politics.
Yeah.
And so there we see national, it has a national impact, right, upon kids everywhere, right, regardless of what kind of like who's governing their state.
Yeah.
And we see, and I do think they're going to see this is what we're going to see in the election coming up in 2024.
Definitely. This is going to be a part of so many party platforms. So I think there's going to be a whole bunch of contenders for the presidency.
Well, Nikki Haley just announced that she's going to be running.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't really announce, but that's what people are saying. It looks like Nikki Haley's jumping in.
Yeah, they said I heard reports. Yesterday that she was thinking about throwing her hat into that after she had explicitly stated she was not. But I think a lot of people are still, I think there's a good faction of Republicans who are still trying to distance themselves from Trump a little bit, and some of the bona fide MAGA Republicans, and then you also have this group, and there's just so much infighting between them though. I mean, because there's going to be a competition and a rivalry between Trump and DeSantis, right? So that's going to be splitting some of these Republicans, but their behavior is becoming increasingly concerning. I mean, if you see, they're all wearing, a lot of them are wearing these AK-47 pins now on their lapels when they're in, before it was always, you have your United States flag and stuff like that, or your tie clip, whatever. Everybody would have that. And now I do believe they have that. And then on the other side, an AK-47. I mean, that just goes to show you where their values are essentially rooted in, right? Yep. Violence.
Yep.
Nothing good is going to come of this. And I think you're right. I think Florida is definitely going to be setting the mold in education-wise for a lot of number of states, and Pennsylvania definitely included.
Yeah, and just you made a good point there too about there's a lot of Republicans that are trying to distance themselves from Trump. What concerns me is so you've got DeSantis laying down this gauntlet around kind of like anti-wokeness, right? Going a higher education, we're going to go after this stuff is going to be one of these key things. And then Trump just this week, I happen to catch this. I mean, I don't follow his whatever the Truth Social, whatever their nonsense that he's got going on.
Parlor.
Right. But
No.
I think they had it on the Majority Report. They played part of it, or it came up in one of my feeds where where DeSantis is going this anti-woke stuff. Trump was full on anti-trans, right? Full on anti-trans about, your kids are being manipulated. He talked about trans, the kids that are kind of gender questioning, everything like this, talking about kind of trans being kind of about genital mutilation, importing that kind of language.
Yeah.
So from those Republicans who say, we're going to distance ourselves from Trump, right? I could see them, then they're supporting DeSantis, right? And then the news media is going to follow that and be saying, well, DeSantis is the reasonable one. Trump is the crazy. DeSantis is the reasonable one. Meanwhile, DeSantis is on the far right, So we shall see. It's going to be crazy. But yeah, so that's our national. That's our kind of national stuff happening on the kind of national wise. But that there's a lot of stuff that's been kind of happening right here, as we talked about on the show last week, and we talked about on the show even on kind of Monday too as well. We're seeing most concerning what's been happening in my neck of the woods with Penridge has been the kind of overlay of the Hillsdale curriculum, that kind of right-wing Christian private college up in Michigan, the overlaying of that to the Penridge curriculum, trying to force that through. That was like, been kind of like first and foremost, like in the front of my brain. But I understand, like, we're seeing this spreading out. I mean, Central Bucks has been getting a lot of coverage about what's happening with Central Bucks. That's ongoing saga. We're seeing the the taking down of quotes, right? We're seeing the kind of the implementation of the suppression policies and the censorship policies over there. We hear rumblings now that over in Souderton, we're going to get some anti-union campaigns. We're going to be some kind of more attacks are going to be happening there. But my understanding is we're starting to see like some of this kind of behavior creeping itself up in the Palisades School District too as well, right? So, I mean, we don't have to start there, but like I know there's been a lot of happening. We haven't talked about what's happening in Palisades for quite some bit, so maybe you can kind of walk us into that.
Yeah.
Kind of what you see where you see things are, what's been kind of happening here, because it seems to be things are starting to move.
Yeah, a little bit. We've been Palisades always. We're surrounded, like I said, by Penridge, by Quakertown, by Lehigh Valley. School districts up in the Lehigh Valley. We're also we butt up to Central Bucks too. And we've been largely immune to a lot of just kind of the craziness that's been going on. I mean, we had our fair share during the election. We had our fair share during, the masking and COVID and stuff like that. But it was never anywhere near to the points that it has gotten, or to the levels of intensity that it has gotten in our surrounding districts. So it's been largely quiet. The biggest news in the past few months has been, the stalled teachers' contracts. So Palisades teachers were working without a contract for quite some time. There are these large signs that had went up basically alerting to the public, our teachers never went on strike or anything like that, but basically, the whole gist of why these contract negotiations stalled out was overpay. This is a very small district. We don't have as much revenue coming in as other places do. And I understand that the district has a limited budget, but at the same point, the Palisades teachers were like, hey, we are some of, the lowest paid in all of Bucks County, and you can check that too. Like if you go on, and you look up basically starting salary for Palisades. I looked up on the Pennsylvania State Education Association. I looked on their website, and it basically stated that before before the new contracts got ratified, which they just did at the end of 2022 in December, the starting salary for Palisades teachers was $43,000, and that was not really comparable, to a few districts perhaps, but it was certainly on that lower end. And I do believe it was like the second lowest out of all of, Bucks County schools. So there's a lot of this going on, and it's not being made very public. The teachers showed up a couple of times, all dressed in black, all, for solidarity. They were speaking at some of the school board meetings and stuff. And then finally, at the end of the year, a compromise was struck. Now, however, that's probably some of the most exciting stuff that's been going on up until last night. So last night there was on Wednesday night of this week, there was a school board meeting. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend this one, but I talked with a woman who had tuned into the school board meeting via the internet. And basically, it was a relatively tame meeting. A lot of budgetary stuff going on. It's not very exciting. Some of this material is really dry. I don't know for people who attend regular school board meetings, but it's not always exciting stuff that's being talked about. At least it's not supposed to be. What you see in what you see in Central Bucks and what you see in Penridge is not usually what happens at school board meetings. It's just nitty gritty about running the district. It's not exciting. So anyway, during this budget presentation, School Board Director Corlandis, during the commentary period, starts going off the rail, right? So according to people who were, at this meeting as well, that there is a whole group of these, MAGA Republicans, who showed up basically stating, that they don't want to support the Bucks County here it is, I have it right in front of
Intermediate
me.
unit, right?
Yeah, the Bucks County Intermediate Unit. They were doing a budget presentation and just going over their plans for the new year. This happens all the time. Like, this stuff is updated. These presentations happen. And they're going over all of this. Now, this is an organization where you have classes like for the gifted programs and special education all fall underneath this particular department. And every school has one, right? It's worth to say that all of public schools have this. And Cora starts talking at the very end. Cora starts talking at the very end of this in her comments about how she's really concerned about, like where the funding is coming from for all of this stuff. And then she starts linking in what's going on at Central Bucks and Penridge, right, in the regards of pronouns and in regards to places like the Rainbow Room, being used as a resource, for school districts. And she starts going on about all this stuff. And mind you, this is during a budget presentation. And she's been one to kind of pop off about stuff like CRT and SEL and all of this kind of stuff. But you can see that it's starting to gain traction a little bit, especially with our new school board elections coming up, right? So basically, she's talking about this, and I had a few notes. She had a problem with the way a particular sentence was worded in the presentation agenda, right? So they had a whole list of goals. So if you go onto the Palisades website and you go into the school board section, you can get a copy of their presentation material. So I have one sitting in front of me, and they go over their goals and their strategies, explaining, what they're going to be doing for students and for the school, this upcoming year. And in their goal number 5, at the very bottom of it, they list something called, county-wide leadership. Right? So the first bullet point states it's to build positive relationships between the 13 county school districts and the intermediate unit. No big deal. The second bullet point states that they're going to advocate in the political environment for issues beneficial to the students and schools in Bucks County. This is the one that Cora had an issue with because it has the words advocate and political environment. Mind you, she's not really looking into the context of what this states because it says for advocate in the political environment, which basically means advocacy in government affairs, for issues beneficial for students and schools.
It's basically civic education, right? I mean, this is basically civic education, right?
It is. It's basically, they're going to be advocating for public education as opposed to like private or charter schools or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with it. But advocacy, the word advocate is now a trigger word, right? We saw that with Bucks or with Central Bucks. So she has an issue with the way this is worded. This is what this whole, she's all upset about this. Then the whole issue of pronouns comes in, to play, and pronouns, there's never been an issue about any of this stuff in Palisades until she brings it up. And she's been getting progressively worse with some of this stuff. Like if you were to go back on some of her meetings, she's always bringing up stuff about CRT, like I said, and SEL, but it doesn't really go anywhere. But at this particular meeting, she just drops this bombshell in the middle of like this presentation, which is really not appropriate. She starts stating that she cannot possibly support an organization or a department, that would even support a place like the Rainbow Room because it's so dangerous for our children to be at. Our children. So she's speaking about our children. She doesn't have any children in the district anymore. And then she's reiterating a lot of what is being, projected on social media versus, via the libs of TikTok and, a lot of these right-leaning organizations like Turning Point USA. And she's going off of some sort of script because at the very end of all this, she decides not to vote when they go to vote for the budget. She votes no. She's a lone vote on this. Because basically she's stating, she stated at the beginning of everything, well, our kids are still going to get these services even if we don't vote for it. That was her basic reasoning. And she said that she was not going to support this because of they support it somehow places like the Rainbow Room.
Right.
So she's actively making, an anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans stance right then and there. And she's voting for something that really is incredibly helpful for lots of students. Like I said, we have special education and gifted programs that fall underneath this budget.
Yep, 100%.
And then at the very end of it, we have, like, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but we have our own, brand of the Badillions up here. We have this one particular woman, her name's Kathy Gentner, and she likes to come to the meetings and spout off about all kinds of propaganda. And she basically gets up at the end of this meeting and says, "Congratulations to the school board because they now just brought, a political agenda into the district." So.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, and I think just for if those folks who if you're kind of new to the ins and outs of these folks on these school boards, just as a reminder who Cora Landis is. There's a great piece. Linda Lee wrote this back in 2021 on Cora Landis, right, about who she was. And so I'll give you this. Here's a little quote from that article. It was called, which was the title, Palisade School District's new right-wing board member, Cora Landis, part 1, part 2. But so Cora Landis was elected, right? So, but in the fall, so before she ran for school board, Cora Landis was on Facebook, seemed to identify with QAnon, a right-wing conspiracy hub dedicated to loony ideas. In a September 2020 Facebook post, Cora Landis said, quote, "Yes, I am a Q follower," unquote, and went on to say that 5G, quote, "is deadly to those with weak and compromised systems," unquote, and that, quote, "when you die from wearing the masks and not having enough oxygen in your blood, they will blame it on corona," unquote.
Yep.
She also kind of shared beliefs, right, through her kind of online stuff that, yes, there were Satanists in Hollywood that drank the blood of newborn babies, right, to keep themselves young. So,
oh, yeah.
And I bring that up, right, because in part because it's like outlandishly like hilarious that somebody is saying these things, and yet we're talking about, I mean, if you want to talk about the national level, you're talking about 43 million Americans identify with this kind of line of things, right? Around 17% of Americans are identifying with this. And more importantly, these are the folks that are kind of at the core and driving force behind local Republican politics, right? And so one of the things that I thought was most interesting when you're talking about, what she was saying at the school board meeting, basically the positive thing I think for us, right, for like, those of us not in the 17% of, who've fallen off the edge there, or, the other Republicans decide they're just going to support her regardless. The important thing for us, I think, is that she's telegraphing what their agenda is, right?
Yep.
She's telegraphing this is what is going to happen for this school board election. And in some sense, it's good that she's saying it now, right? Because I think that unlike what we saw in the last round of school board elections, when school board candidates were getting the advice from Democratic consultants that you just don't engage with these people, you don't talk about it, you don't refute, you don't kind of go after this, you just ignore them. Well, that's not going to work this time around. And so it gives, I think, folks who are going to be stepping up for doing school board and be campaigning around this stuff, we can start to think now about what's the best strategy of kind of responding to them, and kind of highlighting what the agenda is here and how freaking off the wall these comments are.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the woman who commented at the board meeting, she's a frequent commenter, and she's constantly bashing, the district, and she's always talking about, how indoctrination and this and that, and she really is a follower of that stuff. And, it looks like she might be making a bid to run for the school board. We have this election coming up. There's several seats that are going to be up. We don't know who's going to be running again or anything like that. Nobody's really announced anything yet. And for the moment, Cora's by herself. She's very outnumbered on our school board. We have a very, I think, really good school board for the most part. I really think they have the general interest of the students and the teachers and the community at their heart, no matter what their ideological differences.
Right.
But she's this lone vote, but all it takes is, 2 more people on that school board, perhaps, who are buying into this whole thing, into this nonsense for things to really start to change.
Right.
And that's the scary thing. Like, things don't move very quickly up here in Palisades, whatsoever. So I was expecting it to happen, but it's crazy too, because this is at a meeting that, it's not a whole lot of people are at, and just like, bam, there's all these people here, these extremists like pushing these views.
Yep.
So I think that's their kind of entrance. And like I said, this woman, Kathy Gentner, she posted up on or social media later on that evening, basically like, asking, what are people looking for in a school board director? And she had all these response and these comments back from people. And when I was looking at them, I think maybe two live in the district, actually. Two of the commenters, there's people like Joshua Hogan from Reopen Bucks commenting on there. So if you're turf, I think that she is possibly going to have, a substantial amount of funding behind her
Yes.
if she decides to run. And that's where it's really going to make a difference.
Yeah, well, she was one of the Paul Martino babies, right? She was one of the, it was on their website, right? Of that they're supporting that when Paul Martino's like, I'm dropping the name of his organization that he had. Not Right for Bucks. That's the other guy.
Do you mean like the Keeping Kids in School pack?
Yeah. The Keeping Kids in School pack, right? I mean, that she was one of the promoted candidates.
They endorsed Cora. Kathy hadn't run. She didn't run during the last school board election, but they definitely endorsed Cora, 100%. Yep. I mean, and the link, I'm not surprised that Cora, spouts off this stuff once in a while, but you can tell it's being fed to her. Like, she literally just regurgitates, things that she sees on clips on Fox News and what, is planned for her to say at these board meetings. And after the election had happened, I ended up doing this entire huge research paper, basically linking, her campaign strategies to what was happening at the national level. Yep. And it's still all very relevant. And I think, with this next school board election, we're going to see even more of that, except this time, people aren't hiding anything. They're just coming right out and saying it, because when Cora was running when she was running, her slogan was getting back to core values. She was spouting off, her thing was teaching truth without indoctrination. How to think, not what to think. Prepare students for life after high school, and keeping schools open. And she's remaining fiscally conservative. And that presents a little bit of an issue when she puts something in there. She runs off of a platform where she wants to remain conservative. In the fiscal affairs, you have to understand too that we're not dealing with just objects. We're dealing with students, right? We're dealing with actual human beings about these figures and these numbers. They have consequences, and when you cut budgets, that means you're cutting resources for children, and one of the things that I found incredibly concerning over the past several school board meetings, and especially over these teacher contracts, is Cora never really seems to lend her weight in favor of a whole lot. She was always very concerned about the money, and I understand, like I said, that the district is not a Fortune 500 company, to quote our board president, Bob Musantry, he said that. But he did make it very clear to Cora during one meeting. They kind of got into it a little bit, and he's like, our biggest expense is human capital. It's the teachers, it's the staff. Like, what do you expect all this money to be spent on? You know what I mean? And where are you going to cut from that? And she's basically, she's got issues with a lot of the curriculum. She's got issues with, the amount of money that teachers ended up getting paid. When they were ratifying the new teacher contract at the last meeting of December of 2022, they were ratifying the approved contract. I was so happy to see that they, reached a resolution with this.
Yeah.
It was rather unceremonious. It was a very small meeting, given the circumstances. But they all vote yes on this. And then during the board commentary at the end, Cora starts speaking about how she was really kind of disappointed with it, and that she basically, it was more than she was expecting. That but then I asked her about what all, I emailed her, right? I emailed her about her misgivings and what was her problem, because she didn't clarify anything. She's very cryptic when she talks at these board meetings. She doesn't finish her sentences a lot of times, and she skips around to topics, which leads me to believe that she really doesn't know anything that she's talking about, or she's reading over these briefs and these agendas literally a half an hour before she gets to the meeting.
Right.
But she's basically, and her response was that she was more irritated, I guess, or she had more misgivings over the process, basically, of all this. And that's not what she stated in the meeting. The meeting was that she stated that there was more money being given to these teachers than she was expecting or had hoped for. So.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, this is one thing I've been trying to telegraph on our show for quite some time, is that, the attack coming at kind of teachers and teachers union is where we're going next with this. And I think that, the fact that she's kind of raised, oh my God, it's more than I thought it was going to be. This is just reflective of what's in that soup that they're all kind of having their meals from. That there's in the soup is that teachers union bad. Again, this is an old script. This is not something that is the first time we're going to see, first time we ever see this stuff. but they are going to be coming at that hard. Like, and I see that happen. I see that's coming really hard in the Central Bucks because they got a teacher. Their contracts are going to be coming up. It's going to be coming up in Souderton for sure, right? You already have these anti-union folks starting to set up kind of these supposedly pro-teacher sites, which are really anti-union sites. It's like these pregnancy crisis centers that are supposed to be set up to try to kind of like, help you, but really what they are is they're anti-abortion sites that are funded by this stuff. You got the same thing that's going on here with the, in Palisades. You're setting up like, oh, we're here for teachers and teacher control, but really what it's about kind of destroying the infrastructure, and kind of exactly opposite of what they're suggesting. And it's like these, there's a small like group of tactics that these people use, and they just kind of move them from one site to the other as a way of kind of destroying stuff, because destroying stuff is a hell of a lot easier than building it up or sustaining it. So
it is, and it should be worth noting too that there's been people fishing around Palisades because, like I said, this is not like a hotbed of activity. It's just and just because of the demographics, right? Most of the residents of our district, of our area up here, are 55 and above. Like a lot of them don't even have kids in the district, so it's very small. We don't have a lot of the we obviously don't add. It's 95% white up here. We do not have the diversity that other districts have as well. But nonetheless, I was looking a few weeks back, I was looking into our right to know requests. I was looking into our logs. These people, Kathy Gettner included, they racked up some pretty hefty bills that our district has had to fork out in legal fees, basically, for these right to know requests. And a lot of them are really ridiculous. But I was looking at a recent log of it, and it's funny because there was this conservative reporter that was poking around looking for information about our library materials, that was denied. Actually, it states on the right to know request that his request for information was denied. So I don't know where he ended up getting his information from, because I emailed this reporter and he did get back to me about it. And he basically told me, that he was given a tip, right? He didn't disclose the source or anything, but he was given a tip, and he stated in this email that basically he got a hold of the materials he was looking for, and he turned out to be bogus, a bogus tip. Right? Because clearly whatever he found in our library materials was not of a problem, and then we also have this other organization. It's called the Freedom. Oh, here, let me pull it up right now. It is called the Freedom Foundation, and they were poking around, and I was really curious about who, what this organization was and who they were, and I ended up putting out like a tweet on Twitter, and I tagged our surrounding school districts of like, hey, is this organization like looking for information, right, in your district? And I was met with a barrage of people from Central Bucks who were just, basically like challenging the fact that I even was like putting this information up there, right? They were like, well, what's wrong with this and that? And it was this one, there was a couple of posts that were pretty nasty, and all I was doing, because it's instantly baiting. They were, I don't know if I sent you some photos of the ones that were being sent, but it was ridiculous. And it was all because I was asking about this particular organization. That was it. Like, who's poking around? So clearly these right-wing forces are trying to nudge their way in. They're not gaining a whole lot of traction, but I don't see it taking them very long, especially, if the area continues to elect these right-wing supporting people.
Yep. There we go. And meanwhile, both, by the way, Ross and Emily say hello. But Ross had just recently posted something too as well, to notice that the Moms for Liberty has already, and I think it's actually coming up tomorrow, Moms for Liberty is already starting their how to run and win your school board election training sessions kind of right down in Levittown. So, it gives you the sense of where the money that is already at work on this, right? And it would make a whole lot of sense is why certain folks don't want a whole lot of attention being paid to the money that is floating around behind the scenes for all these supposedly grassroots organizations.
Yeah, definitely. So we can be expecting probably a little bit more. I don't know how fast, or how quickly this stuff is going to come up. But as these elections come up, things are probably going to pop off just a little bit more. They're probably going to get a little bit more heated, just like last time. Though I don't think it's going to be the same dynamic. I think it's going to be way more focused on the sitting board members that are already there, and basically, because there's only so much these people can do. You can't pick apart our curriculum. Like, I just don't think that there's enough support generally, within the whole Palisades district, for this type of stuff. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know.
I mean, I think we're going to see what money can buy. I mean, I think really that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, Emily just said, there's 5 seats up for school board this year in Palisades, which is significant, right? I mean, that's a big chunk, and we will see if the money is going to flood in and what impact that's going to have. My concern is I think most people, even in Penridge, where it's a fairly, again, it leans conservative in this area and all this kind of, so moves in that, it's kind of changing where you're at. But a small group of people have been able to hijack the school board and had a disproportionate impact to the point where they control everything now. So, and Penridge has, and Ross comes in, Penridge has 5 coming up too as well. So we're going to see,
oh boy.
yeah, it's going to be significant, right? So I think that we can dig in for this.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things too is, I think, that bothers me the most, about this kind of stuff is that, so like I've mentioned many of times, Palisades is not a very large district. We actually have issues right now with declining enrollment, and this has been a problem for quite some time, right? Every year there's talk about building usage and capacity size, all this kind of stuff, and eventually we're going to have to close the building down, because eventually, if the declining enrollment trends happen, we're going to have, or keep going, I should say, the way that they are projected to go, we are going to end up with just a very low student population. We're sitting at what, 1399 right now? That's it. Like barely 1,400 students in our district. Compared to like, say, someplace like Central Bucks, which is the 3rd largest district in Pennsylvania. Yeah. They have like 18,000 students. It's ridiculous. But to have this right-wing school district, or these to have a right-wing school district up here is only going to push people out, right? It's going to push a lot of people, to perhaps send their children to charter schools, which we're already seeing a lot of anyway, because they don't want it. And I just feel that it's going to like increase the issues. Like, we have a lack of like housing up here, affordable housing. A lot of people want their preserved open spaces, which is beautiful to look at, but it's not very conducive for revenue for the district. I personally feel that our townships should allow a little bit more building in this area, because we do generally have a pretty good school district, and I feel like we should be attracting families, but with this wave of right-wing bullshit coming up and creeping up into our area, I think it's just going to dramatically, elevate this to a whole nother level, right? I mean, what happens then when they decide, that, we don't want federal funding anymore? We're going to end up like Hillsdale. Like, it's just, it's scary. I'm already thinking, of not sending my youngest, into the middle school here, because I don't want to have to deal with this crap forever. Especially if the next school board elections go in any remotely of the same direction as the last one went. People are very conservative up here. They don't like a lot of change, and a lot of people up here are absolutely hell-bent on this whole like critical race theory, communist driven, whatever left-wing evil stuff that they feel is happening, so, and you can see it how people like Cora are linking places like the Rainbow Room and stuff like that, which is just an extension of what's been going on in Central Bucks. There's not been an issue. There has not been problems with things up here until they make it a problem.
Yep, exactly. Well, it's like my guess is this is not going to be the last time we talk about this. So I think that, I mean, I'm so glad you can come on today to be able to kind of like unpack some of this stuff, because I think, we've got, like I said, we've got Alyssa Bowen coming on in a couple of weeks, where we're going to looking at some of the funding streams that are coming in, like the new push to kind of load in lots of money around these school board races. And, as I've said on the show quite frequently, is that we're going to have this, a pretty kind of ongoing focus on what's happening in the school boards, precisely for this kind of reason. So we just got these seats that are coming up, and we're going to need to be paying attention to this, and, keeping the organizing going. So
yeah, and if anybody from the Palisades district is concerned about this stuff, I would really recommend, if you can make it out next week. I do believe that there is a educational program services meeting, so I think it's at 6:30, and I'm just looking for the information on that real quick. So I do have it. It's next Wednesday on February 8th. It's at 6:30 p.m. In the high school library. So.
In the high school library.
Yep.
Well, very good. Well, listen, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to kind of dig into some non-school board, non-crazy politics kind of stuff. Although politics is never far from anything, is it? So we're going to talk a little bit about Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones. We're going to talk a little bit about the House of Dragon, which is the prequel Game of Thrones. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rings of Power, the prequel Lord of the Rings, both series, which kind of met with their own degrees of controversy and so on. But we're also going to just talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what characters thought was cool, and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? So here you go.
Fun
All right,
time.
so this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. I'm here again with Amy Knecht, and we're going to be back right after this quick break, for hopefully a little bit of fun. All right, we'll be back right after this quick one, everybody. See you soon. everybody, welcome back, welcome back. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. I'm here once again with Amy Knecht, and we are kind of taking a diversion away from politics or in order to talk about politics in fiction. So here we go. So Amy, where should we begin? Where should we begin?
Oh, I think we should bring in House of Dragon for number one. Considering we're talking about politics, let's go to that one. That is the ultimate political drama series. So
100%. So, all right, before we get into any specifics, let's give it the overall, right? So, what was your overall thoughts about the series? Kind of takeaways, just so everybody knows too. If you have not watched this stuff, there will be spoilers, right? Yeah. Because enough time has now passed that we're not going to be like right on the cusp of things, so there will be spoilers. Yeah. So, what was your initial takeaway?
Well, for my first initial takeaway was that I really liked the fact that even before the show was coming out, that they were going to be focusing on one of the houses, right? Like there's so many houses that Martin writes about in the Game of Thrones series. And they're numerous, right? So trying to keep all of these houses straight in the Game of Thrones can be a little hard. It can be, there's a lot of different people and a lot of different these like clans. So House of Dragon is focused specifically on the Targaryens, and I think that's really important. And I was like super excited because the Targaryens are talked about in the Game of Thrones series, but you don't really get a whole lot of backstory about them so much, right? About who these people really were, and this series really goes into that, and it focuses on Viserys, who's pretty much like a lackluster king. It really shouldn't be king, and his daughter, Rhaenyra, who's a female and who stands to be, the next queen or the first queen of the Iron Throne, right? This is a patriarchal society, much like we live in. So having the succession of the throne go to a female, is a big deal, just like sometimes it is in our world. So I think I was really excited first and foremost about that, was just really going into depth of House Targaryen and seeing maybe some of like this madness that was so talked about, and the dragons especially, right? So gotta have the dragons.
Yeah, I think I was also really excited about it, and for very similar reasons that you said there too as well, because we get, obviously, I mean, like House Targaryen is important in the Game of Thrones in the part you have, the return, but we don't get to see. You hear lots of stories about the background. So that was just kind of like a cool place to start. And the fact that it's like, 400 years, right? Is it 400 years or 300 years before?
No, so they said it was supposed to be about, there was differences. I think in the series, like it says 300, I don't know. Some of the reviews said it wasn't that long of a time period, or it was like maybe, I saw two different time periods. Like I saw like 300 and then I saw like 150 years. So I don't really know which it is, but it's definitely predates, the people in Game of Thrones, because it's talking about, Daenerys Targaryen is talking about her ancestors, and there's a lot of similarities between her and, the main character, obviously.
Yeah, let me see what this says here. I'm just like,
I think you have to be careful too, because are we going off of, book canon, or are we going off of, the series? I did not read.
No, I'm looking at so
one.
So the first trailer for the House of Dragons confirms the series set 200 years before the Game of Thrones. So 200 years. That makes a little more sense. I had this kind of longer time period like in my head, which then I would keep on trying to fit like the characters and the developments of the, what's happening to the family. I'm like, well, how do we get from here to, because it seems like too much time. That makes a little bit more sense. Well, but I think that, and overall, I have to say, it's like, I guess I've learned a lot about myself, I think, as a viewer of both of these series, and then looking at some of the commentary that comes out online. I find myself less concerned about kind of fidelity to the original and the kind of like, is this 100% consistent with those other things? And I'm not knocking that stuff. I just recognize that about how I was approaching these things. I wasn't looking for, is everything consistent with the kind of the previous stuff? I just wanted to see what the story was, right? I wanted to see a good story, and I want to see, some interesting stuff. And I thought that for me, Rhaenyra, right? The focus on Rhaenyra and her is just freaking amazing. Yes. And I thought her character, and especially where the season ends, right? I mean, I thought like, and I might have even said this to you at some point, like in these kind of words, but I thought it was like the when you hit like the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah.
and then you experience a tragedy that you can't imagine,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And how that kind of fundamentally alters the course of one's life, right? But in this case, of history, you know. And then so like in like at a point where, you know, where like external factors, if you will, right, developments that happen that are even accidents,
Mm-hmm.
then impact, right, this, and have unnecessary consequences and against the direction that you'd like to move, right? Like Rhaenyra Targaryen did not want to go in the direction we see at the end. Then you lose a part of your, you know, like she loses a part of herself
Yeah.
that was willing to do this other thing, and then now we get the absolute warrior. You know, I mean, I just thought there were a lot of people I thought that came out and they were really critical about where it kind of like where it ends, in particular about the, you know, like the long kind of like childbirth scene and things like this. But I'm like, I mean, yeah, it was disturbing to watch, but it was like horrifying, and it was like this point, I felt at least this point of like such deep empathy with where she was in the
Mm-hmm.
midst of all that, especially in such isolation. So I mean, I thought like, you know, that kind of arc and the fact that she was at the center of it, that, you know, again, I thought we were going to spend too much time with Viserys, right, with, you know, her
Mr.
dad, but
Yeah. He was, I mean, he was more, he's a funny character. I loved his character. I thought he was amazing. He's the king that never should have been, you know, because he wasn't suited for it.
yep,
You know, his brother Damon, unfortunately, you know, the firebrand that he is, he probably would not make a very sound king, but he's definitely more suited for that type of role, that type of person to make these hard decisions that often need to be made. You can see that throughout the series that Viserys avoided it. He avoided confrontation. He didn't want to be bothered. And you can see how that affected him, you know, like the one scene where he's trying to show his manliness, I guess, and he's supposed to kill the stag, you know, and it takes him several tries to kill this thing, and in the background you can hear this animal, you know, like crying. It's terrible, you know, and you can see his shortcomings right then and there, and how he is so very aware of them, right? So very aware of them, and how he knows deep down, you know, that his daughter Rhaenyra is much better suited for this than he ever will be, right? Um, and I really do like him as a character, but I think it really sets it up nicely for Rhaenyra because she honors her father, right? She doesn't want to bring any type of war to the realm. She doesn't want to divide the realm over the matter of her succession. She feels it's really ridiculous, you know, throughout this whole thing, and she's very much kind of like on the sidelines. Like all these people are making all these decisions to go up against her she's just like, hey, I'm just going to do my best to keep peace. And all these people keep pushing her. They keep pushing her. They keep pushing her. You know, you have people like Otto Hightower, who's out for his own advancement, you know, who throws his daughter at Viserys. Like it just creates this whole crazy dynamic. And you're right. I really do feel for Rhaenyra because I think she ultimately is trying to do the very best thing for herself and for her family and her duty, being that she's this princess, that she's in line for this succession. You know, she does what she's ultimately supposed to do. You know, she gets married, she has children, you know, she devotes herself to that sort of life that, you know, women are afforded in this particular world. You know what I mean? And women do have it rough. So the fact that she's giving this, you know, having this child in the background, or her husband's plotting war in the next room, and you can hear all this going on, I think that was brilliant to include that because it really does mark, you know, her in not just her internal struggle, right, but like just the struggle period that she's had to face her entire life of no accord of her own, right? Just because she's just there, she's in that particular position, and all of this stress is heaped upon her. And you're right, that last episode, you know, it just breaks her. It completely, you can just see the emotions seething out. Like it's just done. I was crying. I was in tears. I was like, oh my God, like she's going to destroy everything. You know, you could see a little bit of that fire that Daenerys had in Game of Thrones.
yeah, 100%. And I think that, you know, Emma Darcy is just like absolutely amazing in that role. I mean, she is just or they are just like, you know, kind of amazing. And I was so happy to see that because like Millie Alcock, who plays like the young kind of Rhaenyra, I
Mm-hmm.
loved her.
Oh,
And
she
then,
was fantastic.
oh my
She
God,
was fantastic.
and when you know, like you get this jump forward in time, I was like so upset. I was like so upset because like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Wait. What are you doing? You know, what's happening here? What do you think this is the crown? This is not the crown. This is like, you know, it's like, we're not going to do this like change of actors, everything. But I was like, you know, it was sold 100%. I mean, it was like, you know, what Millie Alcock did to basically set the character and the tone of that story was just absolutely unbelievable and brilliant, I thought. And then for Emma Darcy to come in and just provide such an amazing depth and kind of, you know, for her character, I just thought was crazy. And then I also have to say the other thing is that the House Hightower, right, which is kind of like,
Oh, the ultimate villains right there,
oh
man.
my God. Well, and it's interesting too, is because, you know, like Sir Otto Hightower, right, is the kind of hand of the king at that point, right, and is as kind of like is the internal politic, which of course we get in the Game of Thrones too as well, right?
Oh
It's
my
like,
God, yeah.
and it's like how they talk about houses and like the how the whole series about houses and traditions and kind of almost like the character of particular kind of threads of ways of approaching and fitting into this world.
Yeah.
He's like, that guy is like, I thought one of the most evil like people that we've encountered in any of them because of the way that his manipulations and then using his daughter as the means by which to kind of gain access to kind of further power.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really like, and what he does right there is, now for him, Otto Hightower, to use his daughter as a pawn is not unusual in the series or
Right.
anything like that, right? But the way that he does it, and he specifically pits her against Rhaenyra as
Yes.
childhood friends, like he is integral to the dissolution of or the dissolution or oh my God, I'm like missing the word I'm trying to say here. You know, he's basically integral to their relationship breaking up, right?
Yep.
The fact that they're no longer close, and you can see neither one of them really wants it. All throughout the series, Rhaenyra never really wants to be a problem for Alicent, right? After she's married and all of it, she just kind of really wants to be like left alone. She's not trying, you know, I think, to make herself an enemy, and especially after they do the time shift where she's an adult, you can see that, you know, she's not trying to challenge anything, you know, and you can see Alicent at the same time is convinced at the fact that at some point, you know, that she's going to be pushed out, and then what's she going to have, you know, and she's really protecting her own. And that's one of the more interesting dynamics that I do enjoy about how Game of Thrones was done, but then also too how House of Dragon was done, is the relationship between the women, these very strong character women that you get in this. I mean, in Game of Thrones, you have people like Arya Stark and Sansa, you know, and they go through unbelievable hell. You know what I mean? And they're such strong characters, but there's this bond between them, and you can see this, and it goes across house lines too. So the best example of this is probably, you know, between Alicent and Rhaenyra, because you can see Alicent, though, too, is always trying to defend Rhaenyra at the same point. Like, she's not trying to actively destroy, they're not trying to actively destroy each other. You know, it's all of these external forces are telling both of them that you have to do this. You know, you have to do this for a matter of your own survival. You know, but then also too, the relationship Rhaenyra has with Rhaenys, who would have been queen. You know, in another life,
Yeah.
you know, she would have been the queen. And as much as she's made her peace with it, she's not really an ally of Rhaenyra, but she's not an enemy. And you can sense that she feels a strength, you know, this bond with Rhaenyra, because she understands a lot of what she's going through, right? And she's got her own granddaughter. So there's a lot of these very strong women who are just out to really protect what is theirs. You know what I mean? And it's just, I do like that dynamic. So I think that's one of my favorite things about it. They always seem to be more of the voice of reason in these episodes, in these series, you know.
Yeah, and I think they do. I just thought it was a really great. I mean, yeah, you said like Rhaenys Targaryen, right? Who's married
love
to
her.
yeah
love
to
her.
like Corlys Valerian, who's like, you know, it's like the other key house to like, you know, Targaryen Valerian kind of like alliance, which has kept this, you know, lineage going and this power kind of like going. She is so like, and her character, the way that she carries, is like hardened, right, by the context, you know, but she's not malicious, you know, she's not, but she's, you know, she's a kind of like realist, hardened actor, and I think, like you said, that she feels for Rhaenyra, and there's a kind of that bond there, relationship with it, and at the, you know, it's sometimes you see her wanting to consult, like counsel her to kind of like, you just got to play your role because that's all we get, right,
Yep.
as women. And then other
Yeah.
times was like almost rooting for her. And again, starts to root for her, right? I mean, once you get at the end, when
Mhm.
the kind of the unexpected turn, the question of what is Rhaenyra going to do, right? And then you find out that, oh no, she kind of like puts her lot in with the Valerians, right? With Rhaenys and stuff. Then you see Rhaenys like, all right,
Yeah.
we're gonna do this thing. So
Well, and yeah, because the High Towers and basically and Allison and then her Aemon, right? I believe that's the name is Aemon. You know, when they have them when Aemon is crowned king, you know, and they lock up Rhaenys without any like they don't know what she's going to do. She very well could have supported the whole damn thing,
right,
but they didn't even bother. They didn't even bother. But because Rhaenyra is related, you know, versus, you know, because of marriages and all this stuff, because of the ties, they automatically assume that she's going to throw her lot in, you
right,
know, despite the fact that she's lost her daughter due to Damon,
right.
basically, and that she lost her son. You know, in the series they show that he's not killed. In the book, I think it's portrayed a little differently, or so I was reading somewhere. But you know, but then you know she breaks out of this and she basically like storms the whole thing with her dragon, and she's like, "Fine, you know, you're gonna push me to this point. I am gonna go with them, right? I am gonna join Rhaenyra." And that's when she shows up and is like, "You need to know this information." Right. And that's that respect right
Yep.
there. Because if she didn't have respect for Rhaenyra, no matter how much she might hate Daemon, no matter how much she doesn't agree with Rhaenyra and the choices, she has this respect for her that I just found was just incredible the way that they showed it.
Yeah. 100%. And I guess it's Aegon who's crowned king, and
Aegon, sorry, that's
Aemon is
right.
no. I just looked it up because I'm like
Yeah.
I was saying to Amy before we started talking. So okay, I got to bring up like character name lists because I'm horrible
Yeah,
at
there's
remembering
so
names,
many.
and they're especially like we were saying is like so many of them are similar, right? And so I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, oh that's right, yeah. So I look down to see, yeah, it's Aemon is the guy who loses the eye, and then Aegon is the one who's ends up being crowned king there.
I'm not buying the actor they picked for the adult version of Aemon with the thing. First of all, I think he looks incredibly way too old for 16. He's supposed to be 16 or something like that. I'm not really too thrilled with some of the character choices with some of the kids that they picked.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that was a little strange, but you can see some of that nastiness. And he reminded me of Aemon reminds me of, and I forget his name. I think it was Viserys too. Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, her brother, who's only in the series for
Yes.
like the first couple episodes, but there's a lot of similar that maliciousness that you see, right? That out for blood.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know,
really.
I was trying to think of who he reminded me of, the
Yep.
character, and I was like, who is it? And then it hit me. So, and I'm pretty sure his name, like I said, was Viserys too. He was named for King Viserys.
Yeah, I think that because I am like I said, I'm horrible with names. So, and yeah, and the Aemon character is like he's going to be. I'm just curious where he's going to go because you know, of course,
I think he's gonna end up going up against Daemon. They have very similar personalities. They have very similar ambitions. I really think they're going to either end up killing each other or becoming alliances because I
yeah,
think both of them are out for power.
right, exactly. And but their motivations are different though. You know, I mean that's the thing that you have like Aemon seems like okay, he was wronged, right? He lost
Yeah.
his eye and he was wrong, and he's driven by just well, I guess they're both got deep resentments, right, that are coming out of that. But it seems like Aemon has got more like a revenge kind of I want to hurt you back kind of thing where it seems I mean again from my perspective at least I think that like Daemon is like he's like calculating cruelness right of power.
He's scary. He is
Yeah,
scary. I forget the actor's name who plays him, but you brought up The Crown. I think that's funny because
Matt Smith. Yeah.
he played Prince Philip in The Crown in the first two seasons, which I really loved.
Yep.
But he I've never seen him in a role like this before, and it's a little scary.
Yeah.
He's certainly a force to be reckoned with, and I think it's rather interesting that Rhaenyra really doesn't see it. That she does not see it. That in his relationship with her, it's simply she's a stepping stone. I think he cares for her, but I don't think he cares for anybody enough over himself. And that's just the end of it, you know. So I you can see that by the end because she's basically trying to stand in his way of waging war on her behalf, you know, and he basically almost chokes her out.
Yep.
and you can see, and I think she's starting to see that, and I think we're going to see more of that break between the two of them. That united front that they seemingly had is going to just really break off in the next season.
Well, what's interesting is like the dynamic which they want you to start to hook you with is that, okay, like you just say, you're going to see I gotta go back to the character. Your Damon is going to basically going to be the one who's going to want to push for war and all this stuff.
Yep.
I've got a feeling we're going to see a flip.
You
And
think
then,
so?
yeah, I have a feeling that, and it's not going to be a flip. Not that he's not going to want to go to war, but I think that the way that kind of Rhaenyra is set up now is that now she's going to start to scare Daemon. I think Daemon
Ooh.
thinks that he was going to be able to control her
Ah,
and be like, be like the king in absentia, right? Or,
yeah,
be the, and then she has the right to be there and all this stuff, but this was going to secure it for him. And then I think he's going to find out that no, she's secure it. Now it's her. She is very much going to be at the forefront. And I see the kind of, there's going to be deepening resentment that's going to be built there.
yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, we'll see.
But I could see that because, like I said, I think there's going to be a break between the two of them in some shape or form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whatever way it's going to be, because you can see the power struggle already between the two of them, and I do agree. I think we're going to see a much more vicious and nasty Rhaenyra. Like I said,
Yes.
I don't know. It could. I wish I had read the book, a little bit more, or had familiarized myself with it, but I didn't get a chance to. And then I was reading somewhere that it wasn't even like an actual book; it was like a history. So it's not even written in a storytelling type
Yeah.
of way. It's done a little bit different the way that Martin does. He's such a strange writer, the way that he does things. So,
Yeah.
but
Actually,
but the only thing that I'm hoping for, the major complaint, is there was not enough of the dragons in the first season. So I'm really hoping that in this, I hope, because I think they foreshadowed that, when they're talking about, what happens when you pit dragons against dragons, is that like the whole world burns, and you saw that at the very end of
yeah.
that last episode because, Aemon is taunting Rhaenyra's, I forget his name, Rhaenyra's kid, as he's riding his dragon, and then he loses control of his dragon. And that's where I think, like, that's why I'm really hoping we see more of these like dragon battles
Yeah.
in the next season.
Yeah. I think it's going to get dark and apocalyptic. I think,
Yeah,
I do think so.
yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
there's
Because
all,
that's what I remember from Game of Thrones,
yes.
and people would talk about like the dragons basically, and how like everything was on fire, and it was this epic split between, because that there's a split coming, because it talks about it,
Yep.
in the Game of Thrones between the Targaryens.
Yep. So that's going to be fine. Yeah. Lucerys, or Luke, is the one who gets
That's right. Yeah,
who
his
gets
name.
attacked
Like
for
I said,
their.
so many characters.
Yeah, no, I know exactly, and I only come up with his name because I'm looking at the list of characters. Everybody, so please do not subscribe to me any sense of like character knowledge. So, no, but good. So yeah, so overall, I mean, I think overall with this, I loved watching it, and I love to be immersed in what they were doing. I was, you know. I think this happens when they have series or they have prequels or things come out. I was, going into it, having watched the Game of Thrones and all this stuff, kind of expecting a particular line, and then the way the story was told was not the same way as the Game of Thrones being told. Like, it was kind of slightly off. So it always took me that
Yeah.
kind of like episode or two kind of adjustment to see how they were doing it. But I loved kind of learning that world and learning those families, and the strength of the acting. I just thought was just amazing. And
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
absolutely, I mean, I love Rhaenyra, and I love her character. I love that uh, I'm so glad that she's really the focus of so much of what's going on, because I think her character is so powerful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I really think they're trying to channel, like, what if Arya Stark had been in Sansa's position? You know what I mean? Like, as a head of a house,
yeah,
and the older child and stuff like that, who's put into these positions of responsibility. Because I think when the actress who played a young Rhaenyra, she really, like, I loved her. And I loved the way that I was like, she reminded me of the way Arya was, right? Like, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have children. But if you notice, Arya didn't have the expectations that Rhaenyra had, so she was free more or less to kind of do her own thing and pursue her own way, regardless of the circumstances,
right.
the unfortunate circumstances she found herself in. Whereas Sansa didn't have that luxury, and you see that with Rhaenyra. she doesn't really have this luxury to do what she wants.
Right.
So, but I don't know. That's just similarities there. There's a whole lot of Easter eggs from the Game of Thrones. One of my favorite characters, my favorite side characters is, I forget his first name, but he plays one of the ancestors of the Lannisters. He presents
Oh,
himself as a marriage to Rhaenyra at one point, when she's still younger, when she's still a teenager, because he's in there. And whoever is playing him, I swear, is going right. He's like Tyrion Lannister, but like just
Tylan
yeah, I
Lannister.
love him.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
there's two of them. There's twins.
Oh wait, or Jason Lannister.
There's two of them. They're brothers. They're like supposed to be twins or something. I think it's Jason Lannister. I love them. They are so haughty and like arrogant, and I'm like, I love the Lannisters, period, but I really feel like they were channeling Tyrion in that, just the way that he was talking and going about all these. It was just great. I like loved all of it.
Awesome. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk Rings of Power.
Yeah.
So now Rings of Power, of course. Now, okay, this is the political context of Rings of Power, right? Rings of Power, of course, like the trolls were out in force when that came out, because guess what? Middle Earth suddenly was populated with people of color, right? And like really, like literally, people freaked out over the fact that there were black people, right? And there were people of different races, different complexion. They people the freak out of that, and like for me, that was one of the huge bonuses of the whole freaking thing.
Yeah.
Is because we got to start, because look, we always say this about fantasy, and I because I play Dungeons and Dragons, and I've been following a lot of these kind of really incredible kind of discussions and debates about kind of the question of race in kind of fantasy, right? And how that plays it out in terms of even the races that are constructed in D&D and all this other stuff. And it's great stuff. It's like, well, look, when these games get started, right? When fantasy gets started, right? We had the domination of a very particular like way of constructing these characters. And of course they're going to be embedded with, the same kind of colonialist, kind of orientalist, kind of like frameworks for which, they were set out, and that white people were going to be at the center. And that was going to, and there was histories of that within Tolkien and all this other kind of stuff, and all those writings and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, but guess what? We're not imprisoned by that, right? It's like we get to, and guess what? It's fantasy, right? So we can actually reset, right, kind of our kind of perception and the context and how we think about these worlds that are not kind of indebted to kind of outdated kind of modes around race, ways of thinking about questions of race and who's what and color and relationship, all this kind of stuff. So for me, is like to enter that world now where it's like everybody is like, there's no like, okay, these people are white and these people are, it's not like that, right? It's like, well, everyone's kind of like a range of folks, kind of in all the different kind of ancestry history. So I found that awesome, right? Absolutely love that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the diversity that they put in there, and because I mean, for anybody who's actually read Tolkien, right? Tolkien doesn't necessarily like tell you the race of everybody who's in his stories. He might say, oh, this character might have a darker skin or a lighter skin, or they're an elf and they have this crazy long hair, and they can walk on snow and water, basically.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the biggest thing about this is like it's literature. Right. It's not real. Right. It's literature. So, you can take it for however you want. And if you imagine a character with black curly hair or blonde hair, like it doesn't really matter, because it's not about what they look like a lot of times. It's about the character and the connection that you have. Right. And that's the beautiful thing about literature. And that's why I think there's a bit of a disconnect between people who truly love literature, because when they see that being depicted in somebody else's viewpoint or imagery in a series or a movie, it challenges what they saw.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but like I said, when you have literature, you can't tell somebody, that they got something out of a Tolkien book that they didn't get, that's wrong. You can't do that. Like, that's not how this works,
right, right.
So I think it's beautiful to see that the directors were incorporating all these different types of people, and stuff like that. Like, I mean, oh my God, Doran's wife, I forget her name, but the king, the Prince Doran of, of Moria, the dwarf kingdom, his wife, I loved her. The actress
Yeah,
who
she's
played
great.
her, holy hell, her performance was like everything you might have expected of what a strong dwarf future queen, it
Yep.
might portray. And I was like, the color of her skin mattered very little as to, what she brought to that screen. And I wish people could look past that a little bit more sometimes.
No, 100%. And if you think about it, the way I always think about what literature does, and I think Tolkien is important in my mind is that, like, on the one hand, like, Tolkien's weight in fantasy is just, enormous, right? But also, you look at the history of English literature, right? English
Yeah.
literature has
Yeah.
been very much the literature of nation, right? But the literature of nation,
Hmm.
of empire and colonization and all this other kinds of stuff. And we could take out remove kind of intentionality from what Tolkien was trying to do here. It's like, what we can say is, like, so much of the kind of like edification of say British literature in particular is about this relationship to nation, like, from my perspective, right? It's kind of like saying,
I would not disagree with that.
yeah, it's like, this is a story of how we understand each other. I also think, my belief is also, that's why there's the fascination so much, and there's the kind of, they keep the royalty, right? In part because it's about the narrative. It's not about, like, these people. It's about keeping a particular story about a people, right? That gets constantly challenged by the fact that the institution itself is further and further disconnected from
Yeah.
who the people actually are, right? And I think there's always that tension. And so with literature, so I think of, say, by coming back to Lord of the Rings now, right, and coming back to this, like, say, years before Lord of the Rings takes place, coming back to it now, you can do the same kind of stuff. You say, okay, because it is 2022, right? What is our world now? And let's start from this launching point, right? And just kind of ignore the fact that, like, the original was launched during a very different kind of, like, say, political national economic structure, right? That now we're in this kind of point. If we use this as our starting point about stories moving forward, one, the stories themselves are going to be far more relevant and interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because they allow that kind of same kind of reflection on our present, right? In the way that, literature always has done, right? It allows us to
Yeah.
think about kind of where we are, relationships, about our place in the world, all that stuff. But it makes it in a more relevant context that, that more people who are, making up our, nation societies now are going to be able to see themselves in these stories and contribute to it. Right.
I definitely, and I think that's really important. I mean, like I said, in order to attract, I think, younger people as well to some of this stuff, because some of these are great classics. Some of these are, but it's not always that interesting, especially when you give it to people in a very traditional. I hate that word traditional, but like in a very traditional mannerism where, like, you go over the same points of this story, you highlight the same themes, you do that. Like, it's boring, right? It can get
Yep.
boring, and when you switch that up a little bit, or when you present visuals of a story that do incorporate more of a diverse population of what we see, I don't think people are thinking that the original was like some terrible thing, but when they're reading, though, then they're seeing things just differently in their
Right.
heads, as to say the guy who's reading Tolkien back in the 1940s might have read it, or even verses of how, like, my father read it in the 1960s, like, it just really depends. And I think that that's part of it, because and I was not I liked it for what it was. Like, I wouldn't say it was remotely anywhere near canon for Tolkien, but at the same point, like, if you take the Rings of Power for what it was and the portrayal of these characters, I think it was awesome. Like, they do time skip, but you have to, because with Tolkien, we're talking about thousands upon
Right.
thousands of years
Exactly.
in between stuff, and if you can't base a series off of that, these elves, like Elrond, has literally lived, how long? Like, I don't even know. Like,
Well, if you think about it, I mean, he's like, so at, so I maybe was Rings of Power. No, Rings of Power may have been 400 years beforehand. I now got to look at that.
no, it was a couple thousand years beforehand. It had to have been, because you have Gan. Well, So basically, Rings of Power. So it's like I said, when it's time skipping, because it's definitely jumping around. Because what it ultimately, I think, is leading up to is that big battle that we see at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, right, where
Yes,
Sauron is
totally.
defeated by Isildur, right. So between the time of like when that actually happens, like they just, I think they've condensed a couple thousand years into a more cohesive, narrative, which is fine if people just really understand that. But I think that's what they're leading up to. So I think there's a lot of nitpicking on some of this stuff, but also too, I think there's a lot of nitpicking because people perhaps have not read a whole lot of Tolkien either. So
Yeah, so I was just looking at this. So it says it takes place. Takes place during the Second Age,
yeah,
which spans several thousand years.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, an age is not like just a millennia. It's not 1,000 years. It is a couple thousand years, and that's where people, you need to understand when you're doing something, like, you can only represent what the author was trying to put into words on a
Right.
screen in so many various forms. It's easy to write 3,000 years have passed, but how do you show that, on the screen, or how do you, you're trying, I don't know. It's just, but I think that's what they're leading up to, is this big
Yeah,
battle
I
between
agree.
Sauron and Isildur, because clearly Isildur is in the story.
Yep. Well,
So
I think this here's a line. This is from this the site what's say Total Film or something like this, and they or gamesradar.com was like whatever, so take it for what you will, but this is a great line. If the timeline wasn't compressed, we would be saying goodbye to a fair few human characters every other episode.
yeah,
Right?
that's
So I
what
mean,
I'm talking
just in
about.
terms of the ability to tell that story.
Yeah,
um but I also this is like things similar to with the game or the House of the Dragon, is the fact that the Galadriel is the launching point for the whole story, is also awesome, because when we meet her in Lord of the Rings, right,
yeah,
in particular the films, right,
yeah,
she's this like aristocratic kind of elven of the woods, right, kind of
she's
royalty,
revered, she's respected by
right.
everybody, like, she's feared too, right?
Yep.
She's very powerful, she's feared, but not because of her physical prowess, but because of just her ability to, I guess, I don't even know. I don't know what kind of power she actually has. Like, it's not, I haven't read the Silmarillion, so it's not, or I try to, I should say. I have not gotten through all of that. It can be a little rough. That's the other thing too, is I don't think people really understand, is trying to get through some of Tolkien's stuff is not always the easiest,
Right.
because you're dealing with a language that doesn't really exist, right? You know what I mean? So you're dealing with a lot of names and a lot of spellings of, it can be confusing. When you're trying to, because you basically have to learn what is it? I'm probably not going to pronounce it right. The language of the elves, like, it's
Yeah.
Sindonerian or something like that. I guess that I'm probably butchering it, but like, that's the other thing too. Like I said, it's just, you've got all of that in there as well, and like I said, if you're trying to drag things out, I just think people would be really bored.
Yeah, I think so too. And I do say, it's funny, my I've been thinking a lot about this too as well. It's because I like, I should have said this right at the top of it. I loved it, right? I mean, I loved,
Oh yeah, well, me too.
yeah, so much about it. And but again, this is what I learned a lot about, like, myself as a viewer, right? I like it doesn't take much for me to to like really, if the world is well developed, right, and it's a story
Hmm.
that's kind of like engaging, I'm on board. I'm willing to go on for the ride, right? And I think there was what the story that was taking outside, departures from Tolkien's intention, whatever that might be. I
Yeah,
just thought that was really interesting. If I had to have any complaint about it, and I don't think there was an, I don't think there's an easy way around this, right? But you have a ton of time that happens, but the pace of the show itself is pretty slow, right?
you think
Yeah, I think it's from character development or what is happening for this. And this is what got me thinking about this. Of If you look at uh I tried to watch it with my kids, right? So the first one, and they were bored out of their minds, right? And they just, because it what had nothing to do with the story. They like all the stuff like
so?
in the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
It was just about the pacing of the character. For me, I didn't have it. That didn't occur. It didn't even occur to me, because I was like in there. I want to know. Like, I'm
yeah.
willing to sit with this for like 10 years, right? I don't care. I mean, I'm with it, right? You know, I'm in there. But it is, and you know, but this is true if I think of Tolkien too as well, is that there's a pacing of his world building, and the other thing that is, it is not action packed, right? It's like
No, it is not.
the
It is not.
action comes out of these long kind of world developments, and I see that happening here too as well. And then when we got to the end of the series, right? I don't know how you would speed. I can't imagine how you would speed it up to be able to get Galadriel at the end to where, you know, to walk through that. And
There's no
so that I
way.
really
There's
appreciate.
no way.
No, I don't think there is.
No, you can't wrap that up, and you can see clearly that it's not done yet, you know. And that's the other thing. Like I said, Galadriel is very, very, very old, and they are depicting her, you know, when she's younger, you know, and like so many of us when we are younger, and this is included in elves too. You know, you've got a bit of an attitude, an agenda, and you know, you think you're invincible, and she's a great warrior, you know. And I think she shows that a little bit in the Lord of the Rings in the series, or in the movies. I'm sorry, when they show the White Council. You know what I mean? When they show the White Council and she's protecting Gandalf and stuff like that, she's powerful.
Yes.
And I don't think people really understand how powerful she is, but the fact that she's using it in more of this quiet, contained mannerism, reserved in the Lord of the Rings versus this explosive, you know, personality in the Rings of Power. And I'm like, well, obviously, like she wasn't always this way. She wasn't always this wise one. You're not naturally born a wise one, not even elves, right? Like not
Right.
even elves, they have to wait. And you see that with Elrond. You know, I didn't mind the casting choice of Galadriel whatsoever. I did mind the casting choice of Elrond. I was not very thrilled with his. He grew on me, you know, his personality, but I don't think he would have. I don't know. I'm not. It was a tough one.
Well, Frank, I got to say, I didn't
That was a
love
tough one. I
Elrond in
just
Lord of the Rings movies either. I mean,
Oh, see, I totally was digging him.
yeah, I was
so
like, I just, I thought he was okay. I didn't like, I just was not. I was like, okay. And it was funny you should say that you don't like his characters. For me, when I saw this character where they chose Elrond for this one, I was like, okay, I guess I understand why they chose him because of who he becomes. So, but you liked him, so my bad. But
yeah, and that's just the way it is. I just wasn't. I did really enjoy the way that they focused on not really Elrond and
yeah,
you know, him particularly so much as an individual, but his relationship with Doran, because I think that's really important because they're really trying to show this split, this intensity of dislike between elves and dwarves, right? Because they're like rivals basically.
Right.
You know, and in the Lord of the Rings you see the development of the relationship between Legolas and Gimli, which is always very cool, you know. And I think that they're just trying, I think it's a little bit of like they're trying to recreate some of that same you know, relationship style or whatever with this one. But it's nice, and I do like it because they're my favorite characters, is the Doran and, you know, his wife, and I loved it. I love that whole scene, and I think that's really important. I was really happy to see when they showed the Balrog at the end, though. I thought that was pretty cool.
yes, that was great.
I always loved the Balrog. It
Yep.
was one of the Mines of Moria is in the books, is my favorite chapter
Yep.
out of all of them.
It's
all
so
of them.
good.
It is my absolute favorite, you know, and this, to see that, you know, to show the emergence of the Balrog and Doran's Bane and, you know, all this stuff because of the Mithril, and I just thought it was great.
Yeah, well, I have to say too as well is that the you know, that was probably one of the most memorable scenes too as well in the movie, right? With Gandalf on the bridge, right? Kind of like "You shall not pass."
Oh,
right?
yes.
I mean,
yes.
just the most amazing scene I think for me of all movies, that just of all the movies, like of that series, that moment, right? Because it's a fundamental, like, you know, world shift, right? It happens kind of on either side of that bridge, so to speak. So to see this kind of come back, we get to see the emergence within the Rings of Power. You know, that was awesome. That was great.
Yeah, yeah,
and
definitely.
I also think with Galadriel too as well is like, it's her character, because she is driven by such like vengeance, right, and real hate. Right. And of what they, you know, they killed her, you know, her brother is dead because of, you know, of Sauron, right? You know, because she's going to hunt them down. She's going to hunt them down and she's going to kill them. And to the point of where she's like almost like superhuman. Well, I mean, she's an elf, but, you know, kind of just, she's so driven that even like the people with her are like, we can't go on anymore. We have to eat. You know, we don't have this burning desire, you know, the burning desire of killing is not enough to drive us, right? So
Yeah.
so to
And
have
she's
her at
obsessive. She's become completely obsessive about this,
totally.
and she's convinced. But I also think too, it plays into something that we can relate to, because this obsession of this evil that's lurking, right? She knows it's there, but because it's not showing itself, everybody just seems to forget that it ever
Yep.
existed and that it wouldn't be normally a threat. And if you go to the Lord of the Rings, especially, Sauron has always been that major theme. It's either been Morgoth or him, that there's always this evilness, right, that's lurking in Middle Earth, and to think that it would magically like disappear. That's what I think Galadriel, part of, is what she's so irritated about and she's so angry about, because she's like, you don't see it. Like,
Yeah.
he's never going to stop. This is going to come back. We're not going to be prepared. Like, it's going to be a disaster, which is why she ends up, trying to create that alliance with oh my gosh, it escaped me. The precursor to the Gondor.
Oh, I'm not going to remember. Sorry.
Yeah,
I've got,
the name of it. I have to hold on. I have to look. It's oh my goodness, I'm so irritated now.
well, while you're looking, let me just say this. I'll make this other point about Galadriel is like it, her character development there, it gives a whole different angle to, that moment in Lord of the Rings when Frodo offers her the ring. Why don't you take it? Right.
Yeah.
And she has that point
Oh yeah.
because it's the same thing, right? What's going to drive you, right? Because she's at that precipice right now, because that hate could take her over, right? That hate could turn her. That hate could bring her in this particular kind of direction. So once I kind of saw her character, I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, there's like a whole other kind of depth to what her character basically.
Well, and I think it's really good that you brought that up too, about when Frodo offers her the ring, because if you go that whole scene makes more sense now in the Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Like, not intent. This wasn't done intentional, or maybe it was by the Rings of Power series, but it definitely makes it more. Because if you're not familiar with the Lord of the Rings, you're kind of wondering, while Galadriel is like, she passed this test, but they don't really explain a whole lot of it, about, and this definitely ties into that. So I think that's, like, for people who aren't too familiar, should probably definitely like relook at, the Rings of Power, and then, go back and watch that portion of the Fellowship,
Yeah.
with Galadriel, because I do think things do make a little bit more sense about her character portrayal.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at in the books, like, we get more of Galadriel in the books than we in Lord of the Rings than we do in the film. In the film, it's just really passing. She's there as kind of like, not that we spend a ton of time with her, right? But
Yeah.
I think the context of her importance, even if we don't get a whole lot of specifics about the backstory and what led to her, of that, her being a really significant to this world. She's consulted more, I think, if I remember right, in the books than she is in the films and stuff. So that kind of thing.
But they do show the White Council in the films, and I do want to give the director, who's Peter Jackson, that, because he really does incorporate other elements of Tolkien that you don't see in the Lord of the Rings story so much. Like, you don't really understand her like you said, her importance. Like, she's a major figure in this world, right? And she's just kind of glossed over. So I really did love the fact that in the movies they showed that portion of it, right? Because you really get a better understanding of, like, who's running things in Middle Earth, like who's making these big decisions, and stuff. Also too is why they would, like, tell Gandalf, like, this isn't a good idea, because my whole thing was like, well, what authority do they have, to tell it's just like, he's wizard, like, whatever.
Who the hell are
like,
you?
who are you to say any of this? But then it makes more sense, right? So I do, that was cool. I know there was a lot of backlash about some of that, because they're like, well, that wasn't in the story, but it makes sense. It helps create better context for what's going on.
Yeah, and it also I think interferes with us kind of like overlaying our own projections of kind of like societal organization and the way things are done onto the book. So and not to say, just as a kind of like a natural thing that we're doing, right? We're looking for points of connection and kind of thinking out the stuff. To see that was, look, at a nice little kind of gentle disruption to say, well, things are working a little bit differently here. To think about it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, because especially in that one scene too, and then now I can stop talking about it. But the one scene in that too, where they show, because it's in the scene of I think it's the two towers, right? Is it the two towers? It's the two towers, where they show the White Council, where they show Gandalf where Gandalf is being trapped by Sauron's minions and whatever and all this stuff, or was it in the Hobbit? Maybe I'm confusing it. Maybe it was in the Hobbit that they showed this portion. I think it was the Hobbit.
Really? I thought.
Yeah,
I could have sworn it was Two Towers. Yeah.
I don't remember. I've seen these movies 1,000 times. You think I would know them all by heart, but that one scene, I'm pretty sure that that's in The Hobbit. They show that. They don't show it in The Lord of the Rings because that's when Gandalf goes with Radagast to invest
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
the oh my god, there we go, butchering the names of things again. But the one like castle, right? The stronghold of the orcs and stuff like that. He goes there to investigate, and Sauron basically traps him, and then Elrond shows up with Galadriel and Sauron because they're part of that White Council. And you see, no matter how strong Sauron is or Elrond is, Galadriel is the one who initially is able to force Sauron out, right?
Yes.
So
yes, that's right. That's right.
that
that's
shows
right.
again that relationship between the two of them. That again is being, that they show the beginnings of that relationship in the Rings of Power, and how Galadriel could have very easily, slipped. That's a really awesome. Like, I didn't really think about that before you had mentioned it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought it was so cool. I'm really curious. I'm really looking forward to, like, I love the kind of like half foot, right? The kind of like, the that development of the like Hobbit kind of,
Oh, I know.
I love I love those people, right? I love the way and the kind of, this kind of like traveling, what do you call it? Like what the word I'm looking
They're
for?
like
They have a
they're like
migration
nomads.
pattern, right?
Yeah.
So kind of moving different sites for different kind of locations, and that becomes part of the story that we get to learn the land through.
Yeah.
And it's kind of got this druidic, kind of inflection to the whole thing. I love that. I love them.
Did you look at maps? So when they were showing that, when they were showing
I
the
did.
scenes with them, when they were moving through I was like actually looking at a map of the Shire and of like Middle Earth, and I'm like, oh, where are they? Like, where?
Yep,
Like,
yep, yep.
where are they going through?
Have you seen the maps that are on the like on the main site?
Mm-mm.
They have, I'm pretty sure, like
I
there's
have the maps, the original Tolkien maps in my book, so that's the
Oh
ones
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
looked
No, they have,
at.
because the maps are slightly, if I remember right, they're slightly different, just because of the things are marked out different, because
Yeah.
of just where the entry point. So they're kind of cool. The I know that the HBO site for House of Dragons, the House of Dragons, has amazing interactive maps, which are just
I didn't know
incredible.
that.
Oh,
That's so
dude,
cool.
go to the site, and like seriously, it's really really awesome. I assume it's still up. I haven't looked recently, but I remember seeing it, like I
Probably.
got
I'm gonna
lost in
see the
like on my
map.
map questing. So,
Maps are very cool. So my biggest thing though is like I think we're gonna with the emergence of Mordor and stuff like that, and now that we know who Sauron is, right? Because that was the whole thing throughout the entire series, was like who's going to be Sauron, and
yep,
all of the speculation. Even though I called it was
you
going to be
did, you
Halbrand.
did. I want to make sure that before we left today that I said, okay, you got it, you got it.
He was too convenient. I kept saying he was.
I
Too
thought it was going to be
convenient
the
of a
kid. I really
character.
thought it was going to be the kid. That's what I thought.
Nope. Yeah. And the Theo, I'm still not sure of his place in this. I still feel like he could go either way. I don't know. I think since he used that sword, right? Like he's I don't know. I could go either way. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I kept on thinking, like, this would not work, right? This just makes no sense. But I kept on thinking like a character. Remember, like remember Wormtongue?
Yeah.
Right. So I kept on thinking of a character like that. I mean, he's not. I'm not saying there's going to be like that, but I think like a character that had some sort of like allegiance or some sort of connection that became corrupted, that was this kind of influential. And I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I just was trying to play out, well, what different scenarios of what happens with him, but don't know for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I wasn't like, I kept going back and forth because I was just like, he's maybe, I don't know, but he just was too convenient. And then when he gets, and it's Numenor, by the way, when he
okay,
gets,
okay.
when
Numenor,
Halbrand,
of course.
yeah, when Halbrand, aka Sauron, gets to Numenor, it cemented it, right? Because now he's talking about forges and metalworking, and I'm like, oh,
Totally.
come on. I was like, this is it. Like, this has
Yep.
got to be him. This has got to be it. And I really did love, though, the fact that I think he was trying to entice Galadriel to his side. So
yeah,
if she's walking that fine line right now, I think we might see more of that too.
Yeah, his character I ended up loving. I mean, I loved his character, and I did not like. I thought we were going to see like, because you know how like we see like humans become the problem, right? And humans are the problem, right, in Middle Earth. And I mean, not entirely. I don't want to kind of overwrite it, but I mean, that's where you see a lot of the kind of like those who are kind of like the quest for power, right? Is kind
Yeah.
of runs through like human civilization is really where that's kind of rooted. Like if
Yep.
you see in like the elves are very much about order, right? To a fault, right?
Yeah.
And so they all got these threads running through it, but the competition among kind of say human clans and all this stuff is really was play itself. So I thought that his character was going to be significant down the road in undermining kind of or pitting like human kind of kingdom against human kingdom
Yeah.
of the rise. So I didn't think he was going to be, but then I was like, oh, okay, this really worked. I mean, like that was not what I was expecting, but like you said, when he gets to Numendor and starts getting in and like getting really obsessed with kind of these forging materials. Oh, wait a minute.
Well,
Wait a
that's
minute.
right. And then like they kept saying like there was the people back in Middle Earth, or we're saying of the Southlands, you know what I mean? We're basically stating that their savior is going to come at some point, and then magically Halbrand's. I'm like, he shows up, and I'm like, nothing's that easy in Middle Earth. Nothing is
Yeah.
ever that easy in Middle Earth, and it never is. And for him to magically show up like that, the king that they were I'm like, come on now, like there's got to be a catch. Like there's just got to be a plot twist. This is too happy, like it's too positive. Like, and just by reading some of Tolkien, I'm like, that's not his vibe. Like you
Yeah.
get these amazing moments, but it's so much based in struggle. All of it. All of his stories are based in struggle, and a lot of it is basically, fighting against the dark forces of Sauron and Morgoth and all of these evil creatures, right? Like, so, I don't know. I was really thought they had me there for a second. I thought that the Adar, his name, I thought he was Sauron for a little bit there. I really wasn't sure.
But who's
So
Adar? Who's
Adar
Adar?
was the guy who was basically who
Was enticing the kid?
he no well no that was the old guy. So
Right.
Adar is the one who was the leader of the orcs or the Orokai.
Oh, yeah.
Or I'm sorry, not the
Gotcha.
Orokai, the Oryx. That's what
Yeah.
he prefers to call them, the Orcs, right? And he's basically the manifestation you can see in a physical form of how Morgoth basically took elves and like corrupted them and made
Yep.
them into like this evil species. But there's a power dynamic between him and Halbrand at the end of it, right? This like, because you can see, Halbrand is like, I killed you already. Like, how are you here? So something has already happened between the two of them. And I think with Mordor coming into play now, because Adar is really responsible for all of it,
Yeah.
for everything that had happened. He's the one, but I'm still kind of curious into his part, right? Like where, like what is he for now? Like I don't know. Is he going to become one of Sauron's minions? Like I'm not sure, because there's still this tension between the two of them. Because
Or is he going to be a competitor?
I don't know who he would be though. That's the thing. Like who is this guy? Right. Because right. Adar is another name for Sauron, or father, or whatever it is. Like they said in it. So Sauron is the deceiver. So he goes by lots of different names throughout all the different ages that he lives through. And Adar, which means father, apparently in Sindarin, I think that's the way it is called, Sindarin, the language of that Tolkien created. I do believe that that's one of the names that he went by. So is he trying to? I don't know. Like I'm not sure of where he falls into play. So I am curious because, but there's already a power. So that's what I'm saying. Is he become like? I'm trying to think of somebody that he. I don't know. And are we going to see the emergence of the Witch King? Of
right.
the Witch King of Agmar. Like, are we going to see any of this stuff? Like, I'm really curious.
That's a great point. I can't wait. Apparently we're not going to. It's not going to be out for another couple years. So that's.
What?
Oh, you didn't hear that?
No.
Oh yeah, they think it's going to be like we're probably not going to get it until 2024, right?
Oh no.
If I remember, I'm pretty sure I was reading that. So, let's see.
That's disappointing.
Well, maybe not. We'll see. Maybe they've changed it.
I did love to see Moria, though. I love to see that the way that they had that whole like setup, because the only time that you see any physical representations of it in the Lord of the Rings in the movies, it's all destroyed. It's dark,
Right.
and I love to see like what it was before all that. I think that's really cool. Like I think that's still one of my favorite portions of the whole series is the focus on the dwarves. So it wasn't all so much, it was very little focus on the hobbits, right? It was, or
Right.
the people, it was all a lot about like the other tribes and stuff like that. So though I didn't like the haircuts, I was a little disappointed with all the short hair. I will tell you that. Just didn't seem very elvish to me, but then again, that's my own, putting my own personal thoughts into thinking how they should look. So
Yeah. Didn't like the
I was
haircuts. I
missing
love it.
Legolas. Like, where's Legolas? Like,
Yeah. Oh, crazy. Well, cool. I was just trying to poke around here a little bit. So, love to hear everybody's thoughts on what they thought about this stuff, too, as well. I've got other stream stuff coming out. I was looking at, see if I could dig up anything on the Wheel of Time, because that was,
I haven't heard anything.
no. And I just, there's the latest round of speculation. Last time I looked to try to figure it out was like right around Thanksgiving or so, because there was some initial speculation. Then it was going to be, okay, probably January. And then I just looked at something that said, maybe release window, they're probably talking about the summer, and I'm just like,
Aw.
okay, so people are just guessing stuff.
Yeah.
They don't really know, so
Mm-mm.
there's not nothing's released, so we'll have to wait on that. I'm disappointed about. I thought they had Wheel of Time like in the can already. They were already kind of filming season 2 ahead of when season 1 was kind of originally getting released, but I guess not, because that was going to be one of the things I was looking forward to for like over winter. I was like, yeah. So whatever.
Nope. Well, I do hope they don't take too long to finish, or at least to put out the second season of Rings of Power. So, I really, like I said, I enjoyed it for what it was. It's totally not, along the same lines as your typical canon for Tolkien and stuff. But like I said, that's here nor there, and you can't you can't expect it to be exactly the same, right? Like you can't portray things the same way.
Right.
So I think they did a really good job of it. And like I said, Galadriel's an amazing person, but like I'm telling you, Doran, I love him. Oh, I love him. He's this angry little guy, and like I'm like, he's my spirit. Like that's me. Like that's this angry little person sometimes, gruff, and I just love it.
I was like that, like he's like frustrated, like okay,
I
know.
But they've always been my favorite. Like Gimli was always my favorite character. Like out of all of them, I loved him the best, right? So
yeah, well, my first several D&D characters were dwarves, right? So that's
so cool.
I was like, for the longest time it was nothing but dwarf fighters or dwarf fighter clerics. That's what I played.
Yeah, I mean, I love the elves. Don't get me wrong, I do, but like, just
I've never liked the elves.
they're so stuck up. They
Totally.
can be very stuck up. So.
I've never liked the elves, but whatever. I mean, whatever. I mean, I don't want to hate on the elves, but they were, whatever. So I never
the holier than thou attitude.
Yeah,
that's how they were written.
I've never been kind of fond of aristocrats. Okay, and that's really. I mean, I've never that's just never been my thing. So I mean, as long as I remember, it's like. When I hear like, okay, yeah, the king and the queen, I'm like, I could care less. It's like, even it's funny because as I'm kind of like slowly developing my own kind of like little world for a D&D campaign in the future, right? So I'm running this one that's right now, but I'm developing this own world and thinking a lot about those questions about, to what degree, like, how does rule work, right? What's the role of kind of, say, aristocracy in this world, right? Because I have this, my thing is called, my world is called Ascalon. It's called, there's like this kingdom of Thal and like the free cities of the north, right? So there's this big rift in the center of this continent.
Very cool.
Yeah, and they used to be all one, but there's this complicated, whatever, cosmic thing that goes on. But there's there's the kingdom gets kind of like separated out from these other free cities, and the free cities start to develop along their own. Well, and then this kingdom is this kind of weird, kind of this weird kind of leftover from a previous age when it doesn't exist, and it's not even a kingdom anymore. The queens rule. So it's like, and they laugh at the fact that they call it a kingdom because they think it's the biggest inside joke, right? So it's this thing that kind of drives the secession and stuff.
Yeah.
But, just kind of thinking about that because it's like, and I was thinking about like elves in relationship to this, because it's like I have no interest in even like the internal machinations of the court. I like watching it fine enough, like the machinations inside the court, but it's just not my bag. Like I much more prefer like you were talking about, this kind of sense of struggle, right? You're seeing this kind of real sense of struggle, good and evil is your kind of is your mode, rather than kind of, position.
Well, and that's
Right?
what it is, because I've always felt, and I do love the elves. Like, I mean, my one Halloween costume is elf costume. Like, I love it, like I do. And their archery skills are like the freaking the shit, right? They're
Well,
so
wood
good.
elves. I'm all with the wood elves,
Yeah,
right? The wood
love the
elves
wood
rock,
elves,
right?
right? I've always loved them and stuff like that, and probably because they're a little bit more rough around the
Yes,
edges. But like
exactly.
at the same point, they were, I think, they were written to be the aristocracy, but in the Lord of the Rings, they are apathetic as hell. Like they are totally apathetic. They're just basically like, we're giving up, we're
We're
leaving,
done. Right.
goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And I'm like, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. 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 But
Yeah. So
oh
yeah.
well. Well, there you have it, folks. We finally got here. And you can all thank Amy for this, because it was her suggestion. She had some time today, so we're like, let's do this. That's awesome. It was that this is kind of was probably the best thing I could have like done with my day. It makes me happy talking about this stuff. So
I love
it's
talking
awesome.
about this stuff, like science fiction and the Lord of the Rings. Like I am such a total Lord of the Rings like nerd. It is ridiculous. So I watch the movies like all the time. Like it's so bad. I know them all by heart. Like so
It's funny when I was preparing for like over break, over my break, like at the end when I was doing grading and things like this, I just rewatched the Hobbit again. Because I had, what, as funny as I realized that is like, I don't think I ever watched the last of the Hobbit movies.
it's not that good. That's
No.
my least favorite is the dust. I hate that one. I hate that portion because when you read The Hobbit, there's none of the movie expands it dramatically, and
Yeah.
while that's not the portion of it that I dislike about it, I never really enjoyed the Battle of the Five Armies to begin with. Even in The Hobbit, I kind of felt like it was a rushed ending to
Yeah.
everything that was going on. And then I just didn't like it. My favorite's the Desolation of Smog. Like that's
Yes.
my favorite is that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And I think, and I when I was watching it, I realized that was the reason. I mean, just what you just said, it was one of the reasons why I just never got through it. Because I remember like the first maybe 20 minutes of it. I remember, I was, oh yeah, so maybe I did watch this. Then after, I'm like, oh no, I never got past this point.
Yeah.
It lost my interest. But I was glad I kind of like finished it, so I could finally say like, I read the book, and so I got to the point where we come back. So we'll see.
There's a lot of liberties that were taken, yeah, because in the book, basically, like Bilbo gets knocked out and he wakes up and the battle's over and all these people are dead and that's the end of it. And you're
Yep,
like, what?
yep,
Like,
yep,
I guess as a kid, it makes sense, right? Because it's a children's story and it totally makes sense. My son has read The Hobbit to himself 1,000 times. He loves it, and he's never questioned that point. Like, okay, they had this battle, it's over, But as an adult, I think looking at it, you're like, wait a minute, like what happened?
Yeah.
But I wasn't really thrilled with the way that they did that in the movie. So yeah.
Well, there you have it. All right. Well, Amy, thanks so much for taking out some time to kind of delve into this. It has been great. And we'll be back on the school board ticket. We're going to be taking a look out for when the release times are for Wheel of Time when that comes back. Oh, I know what I forgot to ask. I'm just curious, have you watched any of no, how can I forget the name of the damn series now? What's it called? Not the All of Us. What is it? The one that's just, oh my God, it's the
Last of Us.
Last of Us, yeah.
Oh yes, of course. I've been keeping up on it. I never played the video game. I'm gonna put that out here right now. It's not
Neither
a video
have I.
game I've played. My children love the video game, right? To the point of my one almost obsessive. It's funny. She was so excited when the series was coming out, but I have watched it. I am caught up on it. I do rather like it. That last episode they put out was a tearjerker.
I haven't watched it yet, so don't tell me anything.
Yeah,
about
I'm not
it.
going to say anything, but it was really good. I do like the way they're setting it up so far. I love the kid that plays in it, and I love the Pedro Pascal. I think he's doing a really great job. So
yeah.
But it's creepy. I'm not normally a fan of zombies. I don't like zombies. They're like they freak me out.
Yeah.
But this one is even more so. Like it's just so weird.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see where to see where it goes. So it's I've been liking it a lot. So I'm doing that. The other thing I finished too was the Oh my God, I'm horrible.
You watch the Wednesday series, right?
I haven't watched that yet, so I've been waiting.
Oh, you still haven't watched the
No,
Wednesday
I still
series?
haven't, and it's not because I don't want to. It's because it's just the worst thing is my daughter started watching it, but she started watching without me, like with her friends. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I thought we were gonna watch this, like. So now I've got to find some time where I can just kind of like plug out a bunch of episodes. But I'm dying to watch that. No, I watched the Peripheral.
I haven't gotten into that one.
Yeah, that one's. I mean, there's parts of it I really love, and there's other parts that I'm just like, oh, it's okay. But I love the filming of it. Really like, because it takes place in two time frames. And I like the one the one that takes place in like kind of like West Virginia is like where the kind of like that the quote unquote now, which is still the future, but it's like the now. Is that part that I found really fascinating. Some of the future stuff is we'll see where it goes. But The Last of Us, I'm curious what happens with that too as well. So
yeah, so far so good. I know it's gotten a lot of really great reviews. I really enjoy it so far. So
yeah,
for a zombie movie, it's okay. It's all right.
Cool.
I hate zombies.
Yeah, they're not fun. They're not these ones. Yeah, well, whatever. We'll talk about that when the series is over because it's like
yeah, right.
Because it's like yeah, because this one's gets like a little too close to kind of like plausibility for my like that's the thing.
Yes, I would have to agree with it. I thought they were getting pretty close there with the one what do they do with the rabies, the one where like the rabies have mutated. That scared the living shit out of me one day. When those movies, that 28 days later and the 28 weeks
28
later, like,
days
I was like, holy hell, I don't like this. Like this is
yeah
creepy, but amazing. This is a whole nother level of just
right.
odd stuff.
All right, well, there we have it, folks. We have thank you for joining us for this kind of extra special Friday Politics Roundup, where we got to do more than politics. We got to do some cool stuff, do some talking about some great series from the Rings of Power and the House of the Dragon. So we'll be back in the kind of week coming up. Want to remind you that you can help support the show by heading on over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. We're going to be tracking what happens in the school board races. We're going to be back on this Monday for Out the Coop Live. I will be joined by Hannah Leffingwell, and we're talking about her piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education called "The Academic Career is Broken" and the Need for Fundamental Change in Higher Ed. So do join us on Monday night for that. And then in 2 weeks a week from this coming Monday, we'll have Alyssa Bowen back on the show too, but I'll plug that more as we get close. So thanks again, Amy, for kind of hanging out today, and enjoy the awesome weekend ahead of us. A little bit cold, but enjoy it.
Always my pleasure.
All right. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Yes, we are getting ready for the weekend, ready for those wind chills below zero. Are you ready? I am. I'm out of here, everybody. See ya!
Let me try my people call.